Trust me guys, I know how stressful it can feel. You've just caught the bug and your indoor plant collection has grown from 3 to 30 like that. You've arranged your plants so cute in your home and you're admiring the beauty when you realize there's a lot of plants with different water requirements, pot types, soil types, and suddenly it's overwhelming and you're sweating bullets. But don't panic, we've all been there. It's a part of the process. It'll get easier, I promise. Today I'm sharing my tips and tricks for keeping your plants adequately watered without drowning them and stress-free. So I hope you find this video helpful. Please leave a comment down below with your best tips and watering advice. Everyone will really appreciate it, especially those plants who are drowning or suffocating. So let's just get into it. First, I think it's really important to mention that a lot of factors play into how frequently a plant needs to be watered. Of course, the number one factor is the plant type. Different plant types require different amounts of water. That's just the way it is. Calatheas need more water than succulents, and that's the way it's just always going to be. There are also some other factors that play into it as well, such as temperature, pot type, soil type, humidity levels, sun exposure. Seriously, everything can play a factor in it. So just keep that in mind. And everything I say is just general tips and tricks. Of course, you need to kind of get to know your plants and your collection and their environment on top of all of this. That'll just help greatly. So I know a lot of people do like to have a set watering day and it works wonderfully for them. So my mom is one of those people. She has one set day a week that she goes around and waters all of her plants. I tried this in the beginning of my plant collecting journey and let's just say it didn't fare too well. My personality type, I don't know, it just didn't work for me. So if you're one of those personality types as well where the weekly thing kind of stresses you out, I really recommend devoting a little bit of time each day of the week to caring for plants. This doesn't have to be a lot of time, and of course, depending on how many houseplants you have, the time will vary a little bit. So for me, waking up and watering my plants right away is what I really enjoy. It's so therapeutic for me. It's a great start to the morning. So what I'll do is just every morning I devote about an hour to plant maintenance and inspecting my plants, watering my plants, really anything like that plant related I do first thing in the morning. How I'll go about this process is I'll start in one section of my house. I usually start over here on my north wall. So first I'll just examine the soil to see if it's wet or dry. I'll also frequently pick up my smaller plants to gauge the weight of the pot. It is very helpful to get to know your plant and how it feels when the soil is completely dry as opposed to completely watered. That way you can get a really good gauge on where your plant's at. You can just pick it up and know right away if it needs water or if it can go a little bit longer. I'll also examine the plants every morning for signs of over or under watering, such as yellowing, leaf loss, wilting, browning, anything like that. We'll go through the signs of over and under watering a little bit later in the video. So as for the actual watering, I started using strictly rainwater and my plants are honestly really loving it. So I'll just fill up pretty much any container I can with rainwater when it's raining or snowing or whatever, and I will store them in my house so that they acclimate to room temperature, and then I'll just use that water for all my plants. They really love it. If that's not an option for you, don't feel bad about using tap or filtered water. What I recommend if you're going to have to use tap or filtered is to fill up your containers, let it sit out for a few days so that any of the chemicals in the water can dissipate out, and then also so that the water can turn to your home's temperature. So it's not as much of a shock to the plant when you're watering it. If the water's extremely cold or extremely hot, it can put the plant into shock. Room temperature water is the best bet. Some plants are more susceptible to like chemical burns and things like that, so just be a little bit wary, do some research on your certain type of plant and get to know roughly what they prefer and then go from there. If you are using tap water, don't feel bad because guess what? Tap water is better than no water. One of my tips for keeping plants adequately watered without overwatering them is to use an airy soil mix. This airy soil mix works really well for my habits because I am a chronic overwaterer. I care too much and sometimes I do give them a little bit too much water. But the airy soil mix will dry out a lot more quickly than a more dense soil mix would, leaving a little bit more room for error. On the flip side, if you're somebody who's not the greatest at keeping them watered and they become bone dry and get really sad before you remember to water them, I would recommend a more dense soil mix. You could definitely mix in some peat moss to help retain moisture a little bit. So get to know yourself in this process as well, not only your plants. Typically for my more thick, sturdy stem plants, such as my ficus, my pothos, my philodendron, monstera, those kinds of plants that aren't as susceptible to stem, leaf, and root rot, I will water from above. This is another reason I really prefer daily waterings, is you can go ahead and do that, and if your plant the next day still looks like it wants a little bit more water, you can go ahead and give it a little bit more water and not have to worry so much about having to take every single plant to the sink, filling it up and letting it drain over and over. That's just unrealistic for some of us with 300 houseplants to care for. It's just, I couldn't, physically, I wouldn't be able to get all of my plants watered if I had to take each of them to the sink to water them, let it drain, water them, let it drain, water them, let it drain, like some of them would prefer, such as my calathea plants. For my more delicate plants, we'll call them, the ones that are more susceptible to stem, leaf, and root rot, such as, I guess primarily peperomia and Hoya are what first come to mind, although there are some other ones as well that I'm forgetting. I do prefer bottom watering on these. I think bottom watering is a really, really great way to eliminate a lot of the overwatering issues. What I'll do is I'll just fill up a container with that rainwater. I'll put the plant right into the container as I let them soak for 10 to 15 minutes, or I'll let them soak until I notice that the top of the soil has darkened and dampened. Then I'll drain the water and let my plants drain any of the excess they may have absorbed, and then go from there. I do really like bottom watering. It allows the plant roots to soak up actually what they're going to need. And again, I really like the airy soil mix for this because the soil isn't going to absorb as much of that water as the roots are, if that makes sense. I also really like this for those delicate plants because the water isn't going to be sitting itself at the top layers of the soil more. It really compacts the soil down and forces it down. So yeah, it eliminates that issues in a lot of ways, I have found, and it also really does prevent overwatering. So a lot of the signs for thirsty plants and then also overwatered plants are similar. It's just a matter of what the soil feels like. So you are going to need to get used to getting in there and feeling what the soil feels like. So as an example, thirsty plants will droop, but also overly watered plants will droop. And the way you can tell if it's overwatered or underwatered is if you notice a drooping plant, you're going to need to stick your finger pretty far down in there and check if the soil is moist. If the soil is dry and your plant is drooping, that means it's underwatered. If your soil is moist and it's drooping, that means it's watered. And that way you can see if you need to let it dry out more or if you need to give it some water right away. Letting your plants droop between waterings. I was doing it for a while. It was leading to stunted growth because they weren't getting enough water. But some of the signs you may notice in a thirsty plant are drooping with dry soil in general, slowed growth, so the new growth may be coming in more slowly than you previously noticed, or the growth may be excessively small. And then also discolored leaves. If it's dry, you may notice crisping, browning, but like dry browning. So those are just some things you can watch for. Tweak your amount of waterings as you go from there. A sign of overwatering is again wilting, but with moist soil. You may notice discolored leaves that are brown or mushy, so like softer leaves. You can also notice yellow leaves as well, depending on the plant type. So again, it all comes down to filling the soil to see if it's completely dry or if it's still damp. And then falling leaves. So falling leaves often mean overwatering. It can also mean underwatering, but that's not as common. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any additional questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I will do my very best to get back to all of the comments. Again, please leave your best tip and advice in the comments as well as far as watering goes. If you'd like me to do like a week of watering video where I take you around my house every day for a week so you can see my complete process of watering, that's something I could definitely do if enough of you are interested. So yeah, just please let me know. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!